I am running romex around in my unfinished basement and have concern for protecting the romex. 1. If I run romex parallel between the joist, stapling it to the side of the joist, 1.25 inches away from top and bottom to avoid nails, is this considered protection enough, or must it still be in conduit, especially in my unfinished part? 2. I do have 3 cases where the romex must come closer than 1.25 inches to enter light fixture bolted to the joist on the ceiling. Must I protect that part with conduit? 3. I keep reading that romex may not be in conduit except for protection and then at short lengths. What is the max short length allowed, and does it vary by how many wires are inside? 4. If it should be in conduit, I have 12 to 3 romex and 12 to 2 romex. What size EMT conduit could I use for these? Is it 1 romex per half EMT conduit, or must I go bigger, and how much bigger? 5. If I put it in EMT, must I derate the conduit, and how much? 6. I also read never do this and instead junction box it and switch to THHN wire. So which is it? If I can avoid junction boxes to make it less work, I would prefer that.
Hello and welcome to Just Answer. My name is, I will be happy to assist you with your electrical question. 1. When installing romex in an unfinished basement, the vertical drops from the ceiling down to the wall receptacles and/or wall switches must be protected inside conduit. Half an inch EMT conduit for each NM romex cable on the vertical drops. 2. When romex is drilled through joists and/or wall studs, code requires that the cable be protected using nail-on steel plates when less than 1 1/4 inch to the face of the framing. Personally, I install the nail-on plates no matter what the face distance is from the drilled hole. I don't trust romex cables drilled through any hole no matter what the distance is. Somebody can always come along and drive a larger nail or screw through the wood and penetrate the romex. Stupid NEC code requirement, in my opinion, that the cables only need to be protected if less than 1 1/4 inch. 3. Romex is allowed to be installed in conduit, but it is not cost efficient if installing 100% of the romex cables inside conduit. If using conduit, regular insulated type THHN and/or THWN conductors is much easier to pull through conduit. Rule of thumb is, if installing romex on 100% of the project, then only install conduit on those vertical drops that will not be covered by drywall or paneling, unfinished walls. If the walls will be covered by drywall or paneling, then no need to install conduit. Installing EMT conduit with romex on 100% of the project is a complete waste of time and money. Install either 100% EMT conduit on the project using individual THHN conductors, or install conduit only where required to protect romex on unfinished vertical drops. 4. Yes, if multiple romex cables are pulled through conduit, then the cables get derated. 5. Junction boxes are not necessarily a bad thing, in fact, just the opposite. They are your best friend when installing an electrical system. Much easier to install larger junction boxes that will be readily accessible from a drop ceiling and then branch out from the J-box to the respective receptacles, switches and/or ceiling boxes. Also much easier to troubleshoot a J-box in the event of future problems rather than opening up numerous wall boxes to locate the various splices. I'd rather open up only one ceiling J-box to troubleshoot a future loose splice as compared to possibly opening up numerous wall boxes, but that's just me. Receptacle, switch and ceiling boxes can also be used as a junction box, but will typically require a larger size box due to the space volume that a device takes up in such a box. I also recommend to install metal boxes instead of the cheap PVC boxes when installing romex. Reason being, the device screw holes can easily crack and break open on the PVC boxes. Also much more difficult to tap into a PVC box to extend a future device than a traditional metal box that has knockouts. PVC boxes have limited quantity of openings.
1 is half an inch EMT acceptable for a single 12-2 romex and single 12-3 romex? Number 2 understood. Number 3 a lot of romex in conduit not cost effect. I understand. I understand romex does not need to be in conduit when inside a wall. What I am not sure about is must I run romex in conduit in the unfinished part of the basement even when ran in an open joist bay or to a light on attached to the open joist bay? Or is it being inside the open joist bay protection enough? It could still be damaged, but something hitting it in between the joists is much more unlikely. Also, is there a max length I can run it in conduit? Number 4 understood. Number 5 understood.
Thank you for the replies. 1. Yes, a half an inch diameter EMT conduit is acceptable for either a single 12/2 or a single 12/3 of a nautical mile romex cable on the vertical drops, where no wall covering will exist. If installing 2 or more nm romex cables in a 3/4 of an inch or larger EMT conduit, then it must be derated. Thus another reason to use ceiling boxes, as the individual vertical branches will only require 1 nm romex cable and you don't have to worry about any derating factors. 2. Conduit protecting romex is not required on the open ceiling joist since it is not considered as readily accessible. Protection is only required on the vertical drops for wall receptacles and/or wall switches in areas without wall covering. No need to install EMT and protect romex for a ceiling light fixture box. Yes, you are correct in that the ceiling area is considered as not readily accessible and that protection in the open ceiling is not required since the ceiling/joist area is typically not considered as subject to damage. 3. If installing 1 romex cable on a vertical EMT drop, a 10-foot length of EMT should be sufficient as most floor-to-ceiling heights are only 8 to 10 foot high in a basement. If you have any additional questions, just let me know and I'll be glad to answer them for you. Otherwise, don't forget to rate me before you log off. Thanks. Kevin. If you have any additional questions, just let me know and I'll be glad to answer them for you. Otherwise, don't forget to rate me before you log off. Thanks. Kevin.
Thanks, Kevin. You mentioned derating when multiple wires are in conduit. Must you derate when wires come into an electrical/junction box? I know that there is a formula for sizing the box. If I follow that, must I worry about derating particularly below 20 amps? For example, bringing in 10 conductors into 2 gang box, and if I did my calculations right, will fit in the 34 cubic centimeters box. Must I derate them because they are all in the same space, or does the max wire to box formula handle that for me?
1. Derating is never required in a box. Only the box fill ratio calculations are required for any type of box. 2. It is always recommended to install the largest wall or junction box whenever possible due to wire nut splices, multiple wires and/or devices. Not worth scrimping and saving money on a smaller or barely code acceptable box size. The bigger the box, the better and less headaches. Deep metal boxes are always worth the extra cost versus just installing a regular 1900 type of box. If you have any additional questions, just let me know and I'll be glad to answer them for you. Otherwise, don't forget to rate me before you log off. Thanks. Kevin. Thank you for the positive service rating. Much appreciated. If you have any other questions, just let me know. Take care and have a great weekend. Thanks again. Kevin, normal 0 false 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 and US x none, style definitions, table. So normal table, so style name, table normal, so style row band size :0, so style col band size :0, so style nasho yes, so style priority :99, so style parent, so padding alt, 0 inches 5.4 pints 0 inches 5.4 pints, so para margin top, 0 inches, so para margin right, 0 inches, so para margin bottom, 10.0 pints, so para margin left, 0 inches, line height, 115%, so pagination widow orphan, font size, 11.0 pints, font family, Calibri, sans serif, so ASCII font family Calibri, so ASCII theme font minor Latin, so Hansi font family Calibri, so Hansi theme font minor Latin.
Hey Kevin, can I add an addendum to my questions about romex protection? In a single-family home I am having a hard time figuring out the rule on if romex needs to be protected when accessible behind a cutout panel in a wall or drop ceiling. I plan to run romex inside soffits I build around my basement air ducts, but I also plan to put cutout panels to access that soffit because I also have water shutoff and gas shutoff valves in there. The romex will be visible when I open that panel. Must it be protected, or is the panel its protection?
Romex only needs to be protected on the vertical or horizontal wall runs on an unfinished basement. The ceiling and/or soffit areas do not require protection. If the walls will be covered in drywall or paneling, then no additional protection is required for the romex cables. I recommend to install any ceiling romex cables and drill through the floor joists. Then no protection is required. If installing romex on the underside of the floor joists, then a 1x4 backing strip nailed perpendicular to the floor joists is required. The romex cables will then be secured to the backing strip.
Just a clarity: if the walls will be covered in drywall or paneling, then no additional protection is required for the romex cables. My wall is covered with drywall and I cut out a 16 by 12 removable panel. The romex is visible behind that. Is additional protection required?
Not required, since there is a removable access panel.
If you have a home improvement or appliance question and want to chat with an expert now, visit justanswer.com/ythi.